Right.
On your mark.
Okay, now shush. I'm going to do an introduction. We're going to have silence for a bit, and then I'm going
to... This is going to be trickier than expected.
Right. It was very easy when it was just Bob. I'm just going to say that. Right.
That's all my fault.
Straight in. Yeah, it's all his fault. Right. Hello and welcome to this little chat between three people who are associated with the Rehearsal Orchestra. I am Lev Parikian, the artistic director of the Rehearsal Orchestra, and joining me today are Bob Chasey. Hello, Bob.
Hello, everybody.
And Peter Nall. Pete, hi.
Hi.
So Bob is my partner in conducting at the Edinburgh course with the Rehearsal Orchestra, which has gone on every year since 1957, except for 2020, for reasons which need no explaining. Peter has been the leader of the Rehearsal Orchestra for the last few years. How long has it been now, Peter?
I think I joined in 2015.
Yeah, I was about to say 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And of course, Bob and Pete are both former or current freelance violinists and have led many orchestras in their time, and they've known each other for quite a long time. In fact, I think, Bob, I first met you at Pete's place about 30
Hey.
Orkney bus, driving up to presumably Orkney. Who's that good looking young fella?
Time ago.
So you can tell that there's a lot of it. This is going to be quite an unruly meeting. I have a horrible feeling that I'm going to have to do a lot of editing. It's like having a school bus of naughty children. The matter at hand on this discussion is the role of the leader of an orchestra, and I suppose the relationship between the leader and the conductor. And we all, between us, we have feet in both of those camps in various degrees. So I thought I'd just put it straight away to the most current leader of an orchestra, Pete. What do you see, to throw it straight at you, what do you see the role of the leader of an orchestra as?
Well, it varies depending on the type of orchestra. I mean, a London professional orchestra is very different, obviously, to an amateur orchestra or rehearsal orchestra type situation. But basically, it's to, apart from play all the notes in the right place, and is to be the conduit, I think that's the word, between the conductor and orchestra. I don't usually find the words. It usually takes me ages to find the words. But yeah, to make things run smoothly between the orchestra and the conductor, and also probably set the style of string playing, I would say. You know, that's in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Well, that's it. That's all we need to do. The playing all the right notes strikes me as, in some ways, the most overlooked aspect of that. It's kind of assumed that you're going to, but I mean, there's a lot of orchestra parts that are very challenging, not just for the leader. Obviously, there's leaders' solos, which are another thing altogether. But the first violin parts and second violin parts as well, can be pretty challenging. So sometimes, and this is something that I've never experienced you showing, you know, externally. Presumably there are times when you are struggling with the complexities of an individual part, and that is taking up a lot. And that's taking up a lot of your kind of your RAM, your brain power. Does it then get more difficult to be a leader in that kind of passage?
I think, well, the essential thing is being prepared, you know. So if you're fully prepared, then no. I mean, you know, there might be bits which might be sketched over slightly if you're playing Wagner's Gotterdammerung Act 3, as we did. That's breakneck speed, you know.
Yeah. But
basically, I think the leader needs to be fully prepared and bulletproof, you know, and solos need to be bulletproof, you know. That's the thing about the technique, and it is terribly difficult. I mean, a lot of particularly the first fiddle part, are fiendish. You know, your Strauss, particularly. Don Juan is always audition piece page 1, and it never gets any easier. And things like Schumann Symphony No. 2 Scherzo, they are absolutely concerto standard. Stuff.
I always wonder about that actually with Don Juan in particular, which, as you say, is the one of the most famous excerpts, because it doesn't become easy after page 1. They often wonder all these people who have got whiz bang on the first page of it, and then they actually have to play it in concert, and they go, "Oh my God, there's more."
Well, yeah. Often you hear an orchestra playing Don Juan, the first page is fantastic.
But then after, yeah. So, Bob, just to bring you into this, you for many years you were the leader of the seconds in one of our top orchestras. Perhaps you could, the BBC Phil, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that role and how it relates to the leader of the leader of the orchestra.
Yeah, that's passing rapidly on. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I've got to be careful here.
Hypothetically speaking, if
you respect the guy you're working with, it's great friendship, artistic links and all that kind of, then it's crazy, because you're all actually playing the same piece of music. Yeah. Whether it's the first fiddle part or the triangle part, or you're actually playing one entity. And I think we touched on this on our last epic, that for me, the greatest players are the players, and leaders too, this applies to, are players that understand the whole. They're not just playing a virtuoso line here and hoping that the lass on second oboe can sort of keep up. You're playing the whole thing. And say principal second fiddle, principal viola, very, very much in that world. People used to say you're in the sort of the engine room. You're in the middle of it. You haven't got the glitz and the glamour, but you're actually what's sort of driving it along. As regards the relationship, some you get on with better than others for various reasons. I'm struggling now.
Oh,
in that case, let's move swiftly on to conductors.
I wanted to say something about this wonderful. Actually, well, I think you might even be this wonderful leader, who your father must have known very well.
Well, he must have done, because my father preceded him.
Yes, they sat next to each other, I think.
When I have to say, the Philharmonia was just called the Philharmonia, not the New Philharmonia.
And then it went back to being Philharmonia again.
Yeah.
But he probably learnt his leading skills probably from your father. But certainly Hugh Bean is one of the greatest leaders I've worked with, and he's talking about the role between the conductor and the orchestra. He was fantastic, and he always the job to get the best out of the orchestra and conductor together. I got one little story where we were recording. It was at one of these, I think they call them vanity sessions at Watt Town Hall, a great big place. And I think it was some young conductor who was really not great. He could be better, and very rude to the orchestra. I mean, he was criticizing and really getting on to these fantastic musicians, principal bassoon and things, probably one of the best in the country.
I've already got half a dozen names floating around in my head, but carry on.
He was from a Far East anyway, but and we're about 40 minutes into this rehearsal session sort of thing, and Hugh suddenly stand up and went, well, I think we'll take an early break there. And everyone went, oh, great. Bang, off to the cafe, and the conductor was looking slightly bemused. And anyway, we all decamped into the cafe and got a coffee or whatever. I came back fairly early, and it's a vast hall, and right in the corner in the back, very quietly, I could see Hugh with this young chap going.
telling him more.
And obviously giving him quite a what to do sort of thing. Anyway, from then on, the session was fantastic. The atmosphere was lovely, and they were gentlemanly, you know, and they got on like a house on fire and got good results, you know.
So in that sense, you could, I mean, that sounds like on that occasion, that Hugh was acting as a representative of the orchestra's interest.
Absolutely, yeah.
And not just, I mean, all comes down to the music, but in those terms, it was a question of the corporate identity, as it were.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to be bullied by this management figure.
Mm.
You know, so it's kind of not union rep, but a similar kind of thing where you're going, okay, I'm not, my members, the people I'm responsible for in this seat shouldn't be subjected to this kind of.
It's respect, yeah. I mean, respect, you know, the leader knew that this chap had no respect and really needed to learn a thing or two, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's got also that on that occasion, it really would have had nothing to do with any conducting technique or anything like that, or musical ideas. It was simply a question of professional respect, and it's, which is a two-way thing. And he didn't.
I think I'm just popping in.
Yeah, go ahead.
The word that Pete used early on was exactly the word I was using. You know, if you had to sum it up in 10 seconds, not blather on like we're going to, you'd say conduit. It's conduit. It's exactly the right word. But it's a conduit that works in different ways. You know, it's a conduit from the orchestra through to the young, hopefully he was aspiring conductor at that time, whoever he was.
I think he'd aspired already.
Yes, expired. Where are all the good conductors? Yes. The other way as well with management, that sometimes, you know, there are issues within an orchestra, personnel issues of many various types and hues, and therefore, and then the conduit is reversed, and you know you have to somehow liaise from a management through to either an orchestra member, or you know, if it's a group being a bit naughty or whatever. So yeah, conduit, I think, is exactly right. Very quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hugh Bean, I thought of. Your dad, I thought of. You know, immense, utter respect. Nothing else is ever said about those two. And for me, the guy that came closest, so unfortunately I met him briefly, did one concert, was a guy called Peter Mirring, who was leader of the Dresden Staatskapelle. And in one concert, I had Raymond Cohen and Peter Mirring. It was a memorial concert for Rudolf Kemper. And, you know, I thought, yeah, this is it. Quiet, no extra baggage, no bling, you know, no stuff, just consummate artistry, you know, exemplary fiddle playing, and two lovely, lovely guys just sat, we talked about this and we talked about it, and that was it, bingo. I think, yeah, when the circus element starts to kick in, that's where I lose the plot a bit with them.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think that there's also the tricky thing we touched on solos, that you also have to have that soloist element, don't you, to a certain extent, because some of the solos, and we've done Heldenleben, you know, but some of those orchestral solos are quasi-concerto-like at times.
Oh yeah, I mean,
but then you have to be able to sort of come out and be the soloist and then go back into the crowd. And sometimes the thinking, some of the most difficult ones in some ways must be the quite short ones.
Oh, heck, yeah.
That come out of nowhere, and you've suddenly got to be this soloist and then straight back in. But let's briefly maybe talk about that. Pete, you were about to say something maybe.
Yeah, well, yes, I without mentioning any names, I remember a leader that was fantastic. You know, you'd have a big sort of cadenza, you know, Shostakovich type thing, which was very complex or something. That'd be fantastic. And then the tiny solo in New World was dreadful, you know. And it always was.
Much more fun if we could mention names. I think it's not.
Yes, I think Bob knows. Bob's got a pretty good idea. Yeah. It's. I think some of it also is where it comes in the piece. You know, because if it comes earlier, you don't. You know, you're not sort of going, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, sort of thing. If it's a tricky one, you know, that's for me anyway. It's nice to get it out of the way, you know. Because Heldenleben comes up moderately soon, you know, and you can relax a bit after that. It's
early enough that you're not spending 45 minutes quaking I mean, you're quaking anyway, I should imagine, but you've warmed up a little bit into it.
Well, that one particularly, you can really get into it because it's a big chunky one,
Yeah.
whereas little ones that sort of just come out of nowhere, you know, they're probably trickier. You know, you got to nail it. Yeah.
Scheherazad's a pig for that, because you never, sorry Pete, you never warm up. You never get into it. There's not one of those episodes. Well, there's the one with the regadiga stuff.
Yeah.
Other than that, they're all about 7 seconds long.
Yeah.
You haven't got a dog's chance of getting into it.
Yeah.
Oh, we did with Aro Zarathustra, which is in many ways, I'd say that's harder than Heldenleben. Partly because you desk partner and things, the divisi is very complex, and you need a desk partner that can play all his bits, and then he's got about a bar and a half to turn his page and your page. You know, I mean, really, it needs to be on a technology scroll or something. You know.
Yeah, those practicalities can often be can be quite problematic, can't they? Actually, just the physicalities of turning the page. And,
yeah, I usually
where the music is on the page. I remember doing concerts with a different edition of a very familiar piece, and players are absolutely thrown by that, because that difficult bit's on top of page, you know, the right-hand page, whereas usually halfway down the left-hand page, and they go, it takes a bit of time to adjust.
Can I jump in with something of great interest there?
Yeah, please.
Ex-principal cello of this orchestra, the RO, is Mr. Jonathan Del Mar, the great Beethoven and indeed musical scholar, etc. And Jonathan sent me, a couple of years ago now, a draft. He'd just done an edition of Dvorak 7. And the time that he spent making sure that the turns were right, so that you always had 3 bars to go, or 4 bars to turn. You were never going, this ridiculous business that some editions have. There's half the section not playing, the other half are trying to turn over, and the amount of time he spent just getting that right was, I think, laudable. But a lot of publishers, they don't do it. No.
Yeah, so that's all very interesting. I mean, it's occurred to me at this point that some people watching this might not necessarily be either orchestral players or string players. So perhaps it would be useful just to speak a little bit to the role of the leader as per the non-string players. I think it's just for some people, they might be looking at an orchestra and firstly wondering what the conductor's role is, vis-a-vis what the relationship is with the orchestra, but also what the leader is doing, not just for his or her own section, the first violins or the strings, but the timpanist or the horn player or the second oboe that you mentioned. And it might not be immediately clear if there's any relevance to the rest of the orchestra.
I think a great leader has his eyes in contact. It's not always possible with sightlines and things, with the wind and things, and with principals to sort of be like a network thing. So you get the eye of the principal flute, or so that there's an awareness of you're playing together, because it's such a big space, but certainly in a regular orchestra that's easier for a leader, and it's a difficult job for the leader. We know our great friend Richard Stupp, in Bournemouth Sinfonietta, fantastic. My brother used to play Timps there very often. He said whenever he looked up, Dick was looking at him, and everybody said that, all the wind players. He seems to be watching us all the time.
Always, the eyes used to follow you around the room.
Yeah. That's a great skill.
That actually links to one story I have from the same orchestra, me playing Timps, and it was Strauss Horn Concerto, I think, last movement. So you got this reaction, and it was Ken Montgomery, who was a terrific conductor, who was conducting it, and I was coming in late off the downbeat, and he looked at me and he said, "Don't look at me, look at him," pointing to Dick. And of course, more important for me to be absolutely on with his attack. rather than trying to gauge what the, that point in the air is and you coming in late. And of course, so I watched Dick and was together. Dick gave me a nice big smile from the
I think it comes down to what we've touched. It's awareness, isn't it? I mean, we've all worked with leaders that play half a bar in front of everybody else because they are blissfully unaware of the fact that they've got 80 people that, with different response times if you're the guy at the back, with one thing and another. So again, it's just an awareness of what's going on all the time. I think that's incredibly important.
On occasions, very rarely and sparingly, when there's a lot going on and the conductor's maybe doing things and there's something that you might have spotted that is a problem, I occasionally will walk quietly into the middle of the orchestra and just have a quick chat with the wind player or something like that, where there's an obvious thing happening that maybe the conductor's not noticed or something. That's more amateur orchestra sort of thing, but I'm sure that happens professionally as well, which can just help and might just make things run more smoothly.
I love the way you said there, the conductors may be doing things. those words are doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's not always clear what to the players or the audience, and I've said this before, necessarily to the conductors themselves, what the conductor is actually doing. And of course, that is, in a pragmatic level, that is the important role. Is in many ways you're interpreting the needs and wishes and the desires of the conductor. So I wondered if you could speak maybe briefly to that aspect of it, which is, we have conductors who I'm sure are all very well intentioned, aren't we, Bob? Yes.
Oh, hold on.
And
I remember him.
we're trying to get across some sort of musical intention with any luck, and interpreting that intention is not always the clearest thing in the world. So how do you deal with that if the conductor's being quite unclear, let's say?
That's a tough one, isn't it? Because it all comes down to the group, the response, of the orchestra. Some orchestras will fall apart without severe direction, and the idea of the more nebulous approach, it's a disaster. Another group, again, to cite our old orchestra, the old BBC Northern, would just get on and play whether the guy was there or not. Frankly, it's a different animal, just.
I love the story, Bob. I don't know whether you told it me. I think it was Gunter Herbig at the Royal Northern College when they used to have the conductors conference something, and starting the scherzo of that Eroica, yeah, Beethoven 3, and just starting it off like that, and then going and sitting with the students. And they played the whole thing, the BBC Phil, with no mistakes, all. And at the end, he just concluded by saying, "We have to consider our role."
I don't remember that, but yeah, it could,
I hope it's true. It might be but it's a great.
So, well, no, George Hurst did that at Canford.
Oh, maybe that. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't. It was he. I was there. He did it. He. One year, I can't remember, and he did exactly the same thing.
What can you add to that?
He said, our role is to know what we can add to that. So.
Yeah, there was a Rostosvensky prom, the first time that Russian orchestra came. It was his lot, which was a Moscow Phil, I think, and they did Tchaik 4. It was a blistering Tchaik 4. It was a very hot political event as well. So everybody was, it was hairy concert. And he got to the the what was it, 1, 2, 3, third movement, isn't it? He just he started it off like he And he just put his hands down and he just smiled at people. You know, he turned around and smiled at the. He did. I don't think he moved until the very end of it. And which was, yeah, all right, it's a bit of an act, you know, it's a bit of a pantomime like he was.
It is.
Yes, no, it is not necessary. You know, one we used to tear our hair out because there was a very, very great conductor that used to work with the BBC Northern, and he was a great musician. But he seriously believed that, you know, if you had 400 bars of 2/4, he had to beat each one. And, you know, he actually did beat the opening bars of William Tell, which the principal cello did not take too kindly to at all. Yeah, you know, for who that's just the way it has to be. But no, a lot of things will happen you know, of their own volition.
I think that speaks to
understand that, get better results.
Yeah, that speaks an interesting thing for me to the feeling you get when you're conducting something. And you become, so now I'm going to put the boot on the other foot because we've heard from the leaders and I'm going to talk about what conductors feel about leaders. And sometimes you become aware as you're conducting of the leader quite heavily conducting. And that hasn't happened to me for a long time, but it does. And you go, well, hold on. I know you're trying to help, but and I think there are very subtle ways of doing it, aren't there? Just that little gesture, just to help clarify. I remember my father saying that a key to for him, one of the keys to the role was the French name for the leader of the orchestra, which may have changed, but then it was the chef d'attaque, the leader of the attack. So not the attack of the conductor, but the addressing of the music. And so for him, I think some of it did boil down to just being sure that you helped it be together and stay together, which isn't necessarily just a case of ensemble. It's also to do with style and that kind of thing. So that, you know, you're setting the standard, you're setting the tone. Pete, talking of that, sometimes the leader will feel the need to demonstrate something.
Yeah.
Or even worse, will be asked by the conductor to demonstrate something. The sadistic conductor who will say, no, can you just this very difficult bar.
Rodney Friend always said, never demonstrate. Never demonstrate. Yeah. It's very dodgy because, I mean, one has to, particularly, you know, in an amateur situation, but you know, you're just going to fall on your face nearly every time. You know,
I think I'm very aware of this, and I think if I do ask for a demonstration, I'm try and make it clear that what I'm after is not that you've got to play the notes right, but that the key thing is, I mean, I can say you need to be near the heel of the bow to an amateur orchestra or even a professional orchestra, but actually to see somebody doing it and to hear the difference between, you know, what it's going to sound like when everybody is at the heel of the bow rather than floating around there, is quite important. So I do sometimes ask leaders to demonstrate, but I'm also aware that it's not a nice thing to do, but also that it has an important role because you're demonstrating the method rather than the exactitude. Is that fair enough?
When I first started, working with the LPO, the leader was a fantastic guy, Joachim Svensson, I think surname's right. Very tall. He would sit very well, and his violin, his posture was great. Didn't have to demonstrate everything. Everybody knew exactly where it was. And his posture, so that the violin, you could see across the top of the desk exactly where he was and everything, and everybody knew precisely where you were, here, there, what the style was, and also had built up a section of where messages would be click, 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 you know, which was fantastic. There was a real discipline in the section. Conversely, with another orchestra, which I won't mention, that I used to do some work with, you'd be sitting on the back desk as an extra, and the conductor would give a message, and you'd hear it and write it in the part and things. And then 20 minutes later or 15 minutes later, the message would come that had been sent, and it eventually filtered through with Chinese whispers, and actually was the reverse of what it should have been. And that happened times and times. So then you had to send a message back saying, wasn't it the opposite of that? And that would take another 10 minutes, disastrous. But when Joachim was leading, it was amazing, just bang, messages were in, and everybody knew. It was so clear, fantastic, real easy to work for.
So great. Good. So this is all really fascinating stuff. I think it's time now for us to move on to some questions. We've had some questions sent in. The first one, which is the most important one of the lot, I've got them on my phone here, is how do I make a donation to the Rehearsal Orchestra for this, please? So yes, that's a very useful question. Thank you for that one, because we haven't done a course. The only course we've done since the pandemic started was a brief day on the Bartok
it was great fun.
Which was great fun. But we're not doing any operations at the moment, and so we always need support. But I think all artistic organisations are in need of support in these troubled times. So there will be, and there should be, a link underneath this video on the YouTube page for you to send us your presumably hard-earned cash, should you so wish. So there's that one.
Of money.
So very quickly, so this is for conductors, for Lev and Bob. How often have you ended up sight reading a score at rehearsal because of depping, and this is or any other reason? I like the any other reason being I just couldn't be bothered. Bob, have you ever had that situation?
As a conductor or as a player?
As a conductor, as a conductor.
Whoa. No.
No, because
honestly, I'm being honest here.
Yeah.
Have I ever sight read? I've played for conductors who are very obviously sight reading because the cellophane creaks when they turn the page. And I must admit, one quick one. Jack Thompson, fantastic musician, Bryden Thompson, for those who are out there, brilliant musician. Complex personality, brilliant musician. And you could always tell when Jack was conducting, we go through I remember it was an innocuous overture by Grieg. I haven't got a clue what it was. And you could see him, you conducting along, and he would just turn the page slightly, just in case there was a pause or something funny on the turn, which you'd suddenly have to do. So he was sight reading. I don't honestly think I ever have.
I have had to, on a couple of occasions, it was a case of somebody being ill, an hour before the rehearsal and saying, can you turn up to this amateur orchestra? And the program is blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, well, I don't know any of those pieces, but I can stand in front of musicians and wave my arms, and I can, read a time signature. So I'll...
Yes.
And it's all in C major for me, so I'll do my best.
Yes.
Throw myself on the mercy of the musicians there saying, is this the right speed? Is it anything like what you've been doing in previous weeks? And
yes.
But it's not something I'd recommend to any aspiring conductor at all.
It's just there's no comfort zone.
No, and you're not going to offer anything particularly useful really in terms of interpretation. You're just like, it's the best I've ever heard it. And at the very least, crack the spine on the score before you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. No, I was going to tell a very quick story. Our late patron, Rudolf Kemper, Mahler 5 CD. You can buy it on Archipel or something. Don't go anywhere near it. It's a disgrace. It's dreadful. It's all over the place. And people think, what's this? Rudolf Kemper? What's going on? It's very simple. The guy that was supposed to do it was ill. It's a live broadcast. And he took over with about 3 days to go. He didn't know Mahler 5. They didn't know Mahler 5. It was a nightmare.
And that's not,
even one of the greats. You can't do that.
It's got to be more in the blood, isn't it?
Yeah. Have I told you the Tamas Bashri story?
Go on
this time. We were rehearsing in Poole, which was not our usual place. We usually rehearsed in Boscombe, but the library was in Poole, and it was an evening. And he turned up and he said, "Okay, we'll start with the Schubert." And we looked at each other and went, "We haven't got Schubert. This is Beethoven. Beethoven. Schubert Third Symphony, which was one of his party pieces." Yeah. No, we've got Beethoven 2. He said, "Oh, we'll go up to the library and have a look." No, library's closed. So, okay, well, we'd better look at the piano concerto then. It's the C major, Mozart C major. No. It was
one of our sessions.
Yeah, the D minor. Anyway, and I said, "Oh, okay, well, we'll do that tomorrow. We'll get the parts for the Schubert and we'll get the parts from the proper Mozart tomorrow." Haydn Surprise Symphony? Yes. So the one thing that wasn't a surprise was the Surprise Symphony.
Yes.
Anyway, the next morning, Tamas rehearsed Beethoven 2 from memory. Amazing. Just referring to the score for bar numbers. And then at lunchtime, he was memorizing or practicing the concerto which he hadn't been allowed to play, that he hadn't expected to play. And he was sitting there playing it from memory. And at the same time, his mother-in-law, used to be his wife, sat there reading to him in Hungarian. And every now and again, it's amazing, wonderful Mozart playing. He'd stop and sort of look at what she was doing, and sort of there'd be some chatter in Hungarian, and then he'd carry on, practicing this. Anyway, I subsequently managed to ask him what was going on. You were practicing, and he said, "Oh, I have a television program on Mozart in Hungary, and I have to memorize and edit the script." Yeah. But hold on, weren't you relearning learning this other concerto that you hadn't been expecting to play? He said, "I was thinking both."
Yeah.
Can't you do that?
Obviously, you can all multitask.
I mean, that's, and it was fantastic. That's amazing. His conducting style, just to divert on him, his conducting style was quite idiosyncratic, wasn't it? But it was sort of pure music kind of came out of him. Incredible.
It was easy to play for. Right. So next thing. So this is one for Peter, specifically about rehearsal orchestra. And I'm not sure the answer is going to reflect very well on my management techniques. Do you have any advance warning of repertoire pieces before the list is published? Is there, in fact, any prior discussion between you and Lev or Bob as regards pieces to be played? And I think I know the answer.
Well, I do get a week's prior notice, or know what's coming. The parts are usually with me 3 or 4 days beforehand. But with Edinburgh, no.
Well, we do. I'm going to bring to my defence and say we do publish the quite a long, more than a week in advance. So No,
it's no problem.
It is generally I'm the one that does that decides the programs. I suggest them to the board, and they say yes, that's a good idea. I will sometimes I do occasionally say, what do you think about this? And we do put things to tender. We do invite suggestions from players.
With the string thing, with the string thing we did before with the bar top, put up a few suggestions.
We had a discussion, didn't we? So there is some consultation with the people. With in terms of Bob's input, I basically come up with a list and tell you what you're doing, don't I?
Yes, I'm so compliant.
And you're very good.
You have
occasionally said, actually, can I do the Brahms or can I do the Sibelius?
Yes, yeah.
I don't want to do that piece. You've said.
Right. I'm just going to point out that you two are wimpies. You are wimpy poo-poo people, because when I was the leader of the rehearsal orchestra, the Edinburgh course was 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks.
Good.
Halfway through the second week, you didn't know what the name was.
Yeah.
You were so absolutely, music was just coming. It was just there. And I think Harry chose everything. I don't know whether he ever ran. Harry was not one for running things past the board. So I think he basically did everything himself. But it was 3 weeks, and that was. And
we didn't have any of those newfangled violins in those days either, did we? Or conductors, or anything, or tea, or biscuits. Right.
That was the only thing. Tea. Yes, tea.
So here's one. What keeps conductors or leaders awake at night? I think that might not be global existential things, but in terms of music,
relevant to their job.
Yeah. So I start because I can remember the one that I did panic about, which was when we did a weekend on Turangalila, which is 75 minutes long, and I genuinely, for about 5 nights before it, woke up in the middle of the night every night thinking we're never going to get through it. We'll never, it's a monumental thing. It's kind of twice as long and more as the Rite of Spring and more notes per square yard, but we did manage it and it was good. And so yes, what keeps you awake at night, Pete?
Not being prepared. It's that dream of having to walk on stage to play a concerto that you've not prepared, that you think, oh, or even an instrument that you've not learned yet.
No, is that one of my favorite cartoons ever is Gary Larson's Far Side, when it's an elephant on the stage sitting at a piano, tailcoat and everything, and he's looking towards the camera, as it were, glazed. The audience is there, and he's going, "What the hell am I doing? I'm a flautist."
yes, it's a great one.
Oh my God, yeah.
The other thing I was going to say was that not much keeps me awake at night in terms of playing, but when I was in youth orchestra, our principal conductor did that horrible thing, desk by desk. Right, and when I was there, I just joined. I was on the back desk, and he started with the front desk, and it was the Firebird suite, where you go just before it goes. It was that bit. It's all chromatic, very very nasty, and it got closer and closer and closer, and it came up, and it was just terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And still to this day, I get very nervous as that bit comes up. I can play it obviously, but the nerves. There's a memory of the nerves in it, and it grinds the life out of me.
Cool thing. So moving on to the next question. Describe the conductor-leader relationship using as far-fetched as possible, a non-musical analogy as far-fetched as you can think of.
We've done conduit, of the non-lavatorial variety, is as close as you can get, really. It's, you're relaying the information somehow from the one to the many.
Clutch plate.
Who?
Clutch plate. From the engine to the vehicle.
Clutch plate. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Yes, so go expand on that for people who don't know about
clutches. The clutch is the thing that goes round and round that you have to connect up to make the wheels go round in the car.
Right. And so, what am I in this analogy?
You're the engine.
I'm the engine. Of course I am. Yes, of course. Silly me. You're the clutch plate. Yeah. Well, I was going with manager and a football team and captain of a football team, but I think clutch plate is much, much better.
Yeah, it's good.
We said obscure or whatever.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was drawing a blank. And this is another good one. How does the type of orchestral repertoire, genre, period, orchestration, or style, affect the leader-conductor collaboration or relationship? And actually, connected to that is it different these days to be working on pre-conductor era repertoire versus repertoire which was composed to be conducted? When is it beneficial to ditch the conductor, and why? So I think there's certainly things to do with period and genre there that are useful. Speaking as a conductor, the earlier the music, the less I feel I generally have to offer. Partly because I don't specialize in early music or even really classical era music, and I feel that my personal strengths grow the more familiar and in tune I am with the style and period of the repertoire, but also the larger the group. I think that kind of traffic cop element is more suited to my own skills, I guess, than being, in front of a specialist chamber orchestra that really knows their way around Mozart symphonies far better than I would ever do. So that's the as a conductor, I feel less comfortable this, the earlier and the more the players can get on with it by themselves. But
yeah, that's it. Basically, I think alluding to, I think what the second part of that question was, conducting, being involved in a group that's playing with a conductor, but the music is pre-conductor.
Yeah.
Was the guy, was it Lully, stabbed himself in the foot, didn't he? With a stick.
Died of it.
So died of it, poor soul. There you are. Don't stamp your feet. And yeah, this because there's less to do. Also, what I think is that, be careful here. Emotionally, there is not as much in Vivaldi as there is in Mahler. Can I get away with that? Yeah. So obviously there's that whole aspect too, that you're not trying to take some great seismic event and translate it and da 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 da. It's not there in Vivaldi and Telemann. It's different. It's different. One is not needed. One is not required on any level. So much on any level.
I think there is a role. I mean, if you're playing, let's say Mozart. I mean, in terms of the nuts and bolts of actually waving your arms, there's a lot less to do. But with this, there's a great deal to do.
Yeah.
An enormous amount in terms of style and things. And personally, as a non-string player, especially, I feel a little bit of a fraud with with that kind of thing. So the more, I think honestly, it can be quite often very beneficial to ditch the conductor.
I was just thinking, I was watching on YouTube George Hurst coaching Mozart Symphony. I can't remember which one it was now. And it was fantastic because he was showing just how to control corners, and I think that's something that you do need a conductor if they're a good conductor, and with style and knowing how to do that is very important. But conversely, if you've got, you're better without them if they're not very sensitive to that sort of thing,
Yeah, but I think that applies to any music, but especially music of that era. Yeah. And especially music of that quality that requires a certain sensibility and intellect to be able to negotiate it. I
think Baroque music doesn't need a conductor unless it's a choral, choral things. Where you've got vast numbers and things. It's much more fun. As I say, it's more fun without. Well, safer with, but more fun without.
I think there's also that slight anomaly, which is that with the more complex the music gets, so in 20th century, 21st century repertoire, with very small groups, the conductor can be enormously useful. And having watched people like Ollie Nuss and Tom Ades and Boulez in rehearsal with 6 or 7 players doing a very complex piece of 20th century music, again, that's a different skill of itself. And that again is to do with intellect, but also sort of ears and maths sometimes. Being able to just to hear and to shape these things which have their own internal complexities, which would baffle many people. So that's interesting. So I think that's pretty much, what have I got? Have I done all the questions here? There's one, a personal one. Bob and or Peter, what do you know about Cecil Cohen? This is lovely. Yeah. So I ended up getting a hold of it, several of his scores a few years ago. I've heard on the grapevine that Bob knew him.
Did. Well, who is this?
This is from Aidan, the percussionist, who's come to Edinburgh a few times.
Oh, right. Cecil Cohen, brother of the aforementioned Raymond Cohen, who I've just said, leader of the
right.
phenomenal violinist. Yeah, great leader. Cecil Cohen, uncle of Robert Cohen, cellist. Cecil ran in North Manchester, I think it was called the North Manchester Institute, up near a place called Crumpsall, for those of you that understand the workings of Manchester. And he ran an adult education course, and it was an orchestra. It was an orchestra. And students came, amateurs came, people came, and we played everything in the world you've ever heard of. You played at Cecil's orchestra. I can't remember, one evening a week. He was a fantastic musician, encyclopedic knowledge of chamber music. And he did chamber music courses as well as another one. I don't think he was ever on the staff at the college, although he damn well should have been, or that kind of thing. They were all these things took place in this institute up at Crumpsall, of all places. Yeah, people went and did quartets with him. You did orchestral rehearsals with him. Most erudite, lovely guy with fantastic knowledge. And actually, yes, I got a couple of his scores. They turned up. Maybe Aidan. Yeah, I think Aidan does he go to Manchester? Is he at the RNCM? Maybe, because some of Cecil's scores turned up there, and I nabbed a couple for myself. Yeah, great musician, and part of a huge musical family.
Generation.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. So we've had a quite a good long chat about the role of the leader and the conductor. We had one more question, which was unmusical and not to do with orchestral playing at all, but it's to do about the last year and one of the reasons that we're here doing this remotely and not able to be in the same room with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. And looking back on the last nearly a year of the pandemic, have you had any non-musical highlights? I suppose by definition level, any highlights will have been mostly non-musical because we're not doing music. But anything that sticks in your mind as being a highlight in the dismal wasteland of the last year? Pete, have you got anything?
Well, I have props behind me, which I've been, one could say, enjoying family. I mean, we're lucky to have space here, and we've it's been great having our kids. Last year the weather's not been so good in this lockdown, but actually on the first or second day of lockdown, the first one, I spent time with my daughter. We'd Lizzie. I'd been commissioned to look for it's technically musical, but violins for somebody, to locate a fine violin for a young player. And Ingalls and Hayday auctioneers were holding an auction. I managed, the day before lockdown, I managed to go and spend an hour and a half trying all the instruments and things, which is music, obviously. But the highlight was I found a couple of things which I fancied myself, which are behind me. That picture and this very lovely Hill violin case. And we sat there watching it on the computer, the numbers going up, and realizing, we got all the things written down, the lot numbers. Yeah. It was very exciting sitting there. And then Lizzie realizing, we've got it.
Auctions are fascinating, because my mum was an antiquarian bookseller. And so she went to auctions all the time as, dealing things with various things at Sotheby's and Christie's. And when I was speaking, with anything, there was possibly a question that I might be interested in going into ancient and rare books. And I'd kind of expressed an interest when I suppose I was about 15 or 16 or 17. And this is nothing to do with lockdown or anything, but it's to do with auctions. And I remember very well that one day I'd been to a couple of auctions and had asked her what it was like bidding for things. Was it nerve-wracking? And she said, well, next time, why don't you come along and you can do the bidding? And I went, oh, are you sure? So she'd obviously tipped the wink to the auctioneer, who she knew well, and it was a fairly low priced lot, and he was fairly confident that nobody else was going to bid on it. And so when the time came, there I sat and I did that thing, you know. And he looked towards me, and I kind of went like that, and someone was sitting next to me, and I had this horrible feeling that I was going to go way beyond what she was. But luckily, nobody was bidding against her, so we kind of got it at a reserve price. But that was a thing from when I was.
I was very chuffed to get. I don't know whether you can see it. It's a fabulous portrait of Heinrich Schering playing the Brahms.
Oh, I can.
1966.
Yeah,
no, famous. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Bob, has your last year been anything unmusical?
Funnily enough, I was just as Pete was talking, I was thinking, oh, well, yeah. I mean, it has been. I'll be honest, it's been dismal. And, you know, with people talking about depression and percentages of how one has become more depressed as the time's gone on. And really, I did get pretty glum when I suddenly realized there was no more active music for me, you know, for months. The worst point was when we cancelled Edinburgh last year. You know, I thought, well, come on, you know, what's this all about? So I had some fun driving my Jaguar a little too quickly round country roads because nobody was on it because they were all locked down and I was a bit naughty. So there was that. But my number one thing was for years and years and years, Pete knows this, I've been a fan of the great Russian violinist David Oistrakh. And I've collected David Oistrakh records and things for, crikey, 50 odd years. And I've got some quite really, really rare stuff. I wanted to produce a set of CDs myself, and I just didn't have the technical wherewithal. I didn't know how to do it. I found a fantastic company, a man in Canada, and his name is Yves Saint Laurent.
No.
And if you go on and you find Yves' website, it is astonishing. I sent across about 20 old 78s LPs, and he has produced a set of 4 CDs using my stuff. And I am proud and excited beyond words. It was something I wanted to do for years, but I couldn't do it myself.
Yeah.
And so that's taken place. So that's the highlight of my year has been, producing David Oistrakh CDs. Yves Saint Laurent, go on the website. You won't believe.
Extremely worthy endeavor. My one is genuinely completely unmusical, so just to broaden it a little bit. I have, as you may well know, an alternative career as a writer. So I have spent this last year, because I had a deadline for my next book, which is about the nature of my local patch here in South London, West Norwood. So that's actually lockdown came at a reasonably useful time in terms of that book project. You know, I was, trying to write about the locality, and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere apart from my locality. So there's, something quite useful about that. It was quite difficult to find the kind of concentration to focus on it for a long time. But I have got to know, especially the birds, which I'm very keen on in my local area. And just the weekend of the Great Garden Birdwatch, which is the last weekend in January, I went round our local cemetery, which is my usual haunt. And so it's managed very well for wildlife, and there's quite a few birds.
Haunt being the appropriate word.
Oh yes, of course. So silly. And over the road is the church, and we have peregrine falcons hanging in there. They've nested in the past. Fingers crossed they will again this year. And I don't know if you've been bird watching, you might know the drill, which is that quite a lot of the time you spend bird watching isn't actually spent watching birds much, because they can be quite elusive. And on this weekend, it was a Sunday of that weekend, I encountered for the first time in ages fellow birders in the cemetery, binoculars around their neck, 2 blokes with their 2 sons. All of them with binoculars, all of them kind of madly going, oh, look at this, are we going to see anything? The boys obviously been told how much fun bird watching was going to be and how they're going to count all the birds. And I slightly felt, oh, please, let things to come out, and so that they can see them and get these kids infused for this fantastic hobby that I love. And we were just chatting, And one of the guys said, have you seen the peregrines recently? And I said, well, yeah, they do hang around. You have to look a bit closely on up there. And literally, as I was saying this, one of the peregrines called from the church tower, very distinctive, which you don't often hear, but they do it when they're kind of interested in a nest site. And so we all looked. I said, no, peregrine, look up there. And it was there silhouetted against the sky, and as we looked up, the partner peregrine came in with a pigeon in its talons and handed it to the female, which then started in silhouette picking at this pigeon. And these 10-year-old boys were going, this is amazing. As indeed any 10-year-old, boy would. And I thought, this is fantastic. They are now, they'll remember that. It's almost as if the peregrines had been ordered by the question, to actually put on a performance for it. And so that just felt great, because it's the kind of thing that you want to pass on to the next generation. And they could easily have come away from it thinking, oh God, it's all a bit boring and there's nothing going on. But to have something like that, and the trouble is that they're now going to expect every time they go out bird watching, something equally exciting is going to happen, and that's not necessarily the case, but that's part of the fun. So that's my little highlight that I could think of, and definitely unmusical. Thank you both very much indeed for your time and expertise and insights. Always a pleasure to catch up with you both. And let's hope that at some point in the very near future, we'll be doing something very similar, but with perhaps something in a glass to help us. Thank you very much. And let's maybe we'll do another one of these talking about something else. Who knows what? Thanks very much and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.